Hey everybody, Nick Espinosa, your chief security fanatic here, and today I'm asking the question, why won't the United States admit it's at war? And I think this is an important one. Now, you may be thinking about Ukraine or Israel or potentially Venezuela, which is gearing up to invade Guyana, but there's something else going on that quite frankly puts us in a state of war, and we're not saying it. Now, the backdrop of this is an article I recently read in Ours by Dan Gooden, and here's what's going on. The Biden administration yesterday on Tuesday warned the nation's governors that drinking water and wastewater utilities in their states are facing quote-unquote disabling cyber attacks by hostile foreign nations that are targeting mission-critical plant operations. Now, Jake Sullivan, who's the assistant to the president for national security affairs, and Michael Regan, administrator of the EPA, wrote in a letter, and I quote, "Disabling cyber attacks are striking water and wastewater systems throughout the United States. These attacks have the potential to disrupt the critical lifeline to clean and safe drinking water, as well as impose significant costs to the affected communities," end quote. Now, if you are a longtime listener or follower of mine, you know I've been talking about cyber attacks against water and wastewater and the insecurity we have in the over 50,000 water and wastewater districts essentially across the United States. So I'm glad that essentially they're sending memos, but we need to do stuff here. Now, the letter also cited two recent hacking threats that water utilities have faced by basically from groups of hostile actors that have been backed by foreign countries. Now, the first incident occurred when attackers backed by Iran disabled operations gear that was used in water facilities that were still using a publicly known default administrator password and logged right in. In other words, public facing infrastructure, password was password, got right in. I can't tell you how many times we've tried to fix that, but this is what we're talking about when we're talking about underfunded municipal water systems that simply don't have the ability to hire anybody that can do cyber hygiene. Now, the letter did not identify the facility by name, but the details included tied it back to the Alaquipa water district in western Pennsylvania that got hit last November. Excuse me. Now, in that case, the attackers compromised a programmable logic controller made by Unitronics and essentially made the device screen display an anti-Israel message. Could have done a lot worse. In Oldsmar, Florida, if you remember a few years back, somebody introduced lye into the water system that if it hadn't been caught actually by accident, but almost immediately, would have poisoned potentially a town of 15,000 humans, not to mention all the pets, animals, whatever, that are drinking from that source. Now, utility officials in Alaquipa responded by temporarily shutting down the pump that provided drinking water to local townships. In other words, you opened up the tap, it wasn't working for a period of time. That is deeply, deeply concerning. Now, a second threat was publicly revealed last month by CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. An official said that a hacking group backed by the Chinese government and tracked under the name Volt Typhoon was maintaining a foothold inside the networks of multiple critical infrastructure organizations, including those in communication, energy, transportation, and of course, water and wastewater, what we're talking about now. Now, the advisory said that the attackers, were pre-positioning themselves inside IT environments to enable disruption operations across multiple critical infrastructure sectors in the event of a crisis or conflict within the United States. In other words, we have something internal going on, and obviously we've got a contentious political season. What happens if that turns into political violence, God forbid, and I hope nobody would want that. But on top of it, they just go ahead and decide to turn off the lights on us because they've hit us, or stop the drinking water, those kinds of things. This is what we're talking about. Now, the attackers, according to the officials, have been present and persistent in some of these networks for as long as 5 years. That is an advanced persistent threat, or APT. And if they are backed by foreign governments, they're literally sitting in our critical infrastructure, potentially doing harm to Americans and the stability of the American government, infrastructure, military, all those kinds of things. That is a de facto state of war. Now, the letter also extended an invitation for the secretaries of state of each state to essentially attend the meeting to talk about this and improve all of this. They also announced the EPA is forming a water sector cybersecurity task force. I'd love to get on that to identify vulnerabilities in water systems. And that virtual meeting will take place tomorrow on Thursday, as I'm sitting here recording on Wednesday, the 20th of March. But this is what I'm talking about. And I think the reason why we are not actually declaring war is, one, war is costly, expensive, and we just went through Iraq, Afghanistan, all of that. We've got just the exhaustion that is going on with Ukraine and Russia right now. That was supposed to be a 3-day war per Putin, and we're in year 3 now. Obviously, that's not going anywhere. Israel, Gaza is a mess. As I mentioned, Venezuela just voted to invade Guyana because Guyana has a very non-existent military and a lot of oil, and they're next door, and Venezuela wants it. The world is just a hotbed, and it seems like it's melting down. But at the same token, if we are protecting that which is within our borders, meaning our critical infrastructure, and we have foreign attackers sitting in there damaging or waiting to damage this, that is tantamount to a state of war. And we're not really doing much about it. Now, we can level sanctions. The world's been leveling sanctions at Russia, but I think the reason why we're not doing it is because I think humans have a perception, at least in the last 100 years, actually, in terms of civilization, that war means somebody's dropping bombs on us. We're seeing things explode. We're seeing people shot. We're seeing an invading army. And honestly, that's not going to happen. Canada's not going to invade us. Mexico's not going to invade us. And nobody's going to cross the sea to invade us. We might get nuked, but we're going to nuke them right back. So understand the predicament that the United States is in. We are geographically positioned to defend ourselves better than most, and we've got really staunch allies to the north and south, so we don't have to worry about that, short of a missile attack, and we've got defenses for that. So how is a country going to hit us? How is a Russia going to hit us? They're not going to invade us. They're not going to nuke us. We'll nuke them right back. They're going to cyber attack us. And this is what we're talking about. And it's not just them. And we see cutouts all around the world that where we have these problems, where kinetic war is actually starting, even though it's not on our shore. So if you look at the entire situation with the Houthis, they are backed by Iran. They were hitting U.S. naval vessels and everything else, basically in the Gulf region in that area. And by virtue of that, that is essentially tantamount to a war. We've also seen U.S. military personnel essentially hit by Iranian-backed militant groups, all around, Lebanon, Syria, that area, ever since, the Gaza situation started back in October. So we are at a central de facto state of war right now, but we're not recognizing it. We're not talking about it. We're not acknowledging it. And I quite frankly think it's because if it's on the cyber front, we just kind of ignore it. And I don't think that's the way that we need to be. And by we, I mean the general public, because we in cybersecurity, cyber warfare, understand very much what's going on, which is why I'm talking to you about this now. So food for thought. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. If you're not in cybersecurity, but you're watching this or listening to this, what's your take on it? Because quite frankly, I would have to imagine that if somebody was going to potentially poison, the water supply or stop the water supply, them's fighting words. And what should we do about it? Be curious to know. Let me know. Please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please attempt to stay private. Thanks, everybody.